On my RTS-DC1, I'm going to go to my administrative tools and to DHCP. I'm going to put that in full screen. Now, a few things we can see. Now that I have this installed, I can see that it's authorized. I know that because it has this green circle with this white check. If I were to right click, there is an option to unauthorize. Now it says removing this authorization for the server will cause the server to stop responding to clients. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to say yes. Now if I refresh the view, you'll see it has this white circle with a red down arrow. That just denotes that it's unauthorized. So anytime you see that, you know this server is effectively offline, cannot lease addresses until you authorize it. But to authorize it, it's nothing more than going back and clicking authorize and refresh, and they'll just turn to green circles with checks. Now, what I'm going to do for IP version 4, because that's the one we're concerned with, I'm going to create a new scope. So I'm going to right-click that, new scope. When I click next here, it wants a name for the scope. I'm going to name this scope Office 1. And I'll click next for that. The start IP address, I'm going to lease IP addresses starting with 192.168.1.100 to 192.168.1.200. So 100 IP addresses I'm actually leasing there. The length and subnet mask, that will stay default because based on the address you put in, it automatically sets your subnet mask for you. If you have a custom subnet mask in your environment, you could change it here, but we're using the default. So I'll click next for that. That's the range of addresses. If I wanted any exclusions, let's say, as an example, I know that I'm going to use IP address 192.168.1.150 through 192.168.1.155. They're going to be used for static IP addresses on some devices. I never want DHCP to lease those addresses. Then I'll just add an exclusion, and we'll just say next for that. Lease duration. How long is your validity period when you have an address leased to you? The default is 8 days. I'm going to leave that on 8 days, and I'll just click next. I could be done. We could say we don't want to configure any additional options, and my scope is complete. But if you think about what we defined, all we did was add a range of addresses. We added exclusions within that range that I will not lease, and a lease duration. That's it. Well, if you want clients to connect to the internet, they will need a default gateway. They also need a DNS server if they want to connect to the internet. If you want them to connect your resources just in the actual environment, in the domain, they must have a DNS server for that as well. So almost always, you're going to say, yes, I want to configure these options now. And if we go next, it says, well, what's the default gateway you want to assign? Now, my machines are not connected to the internet, but I'm just going to use 192.168.1.1 as a default gateway. And I'll just add that in and go to next. Now, it already has my domain name because this server is joined to the domain. And it also knows this is the IP address of my server, which is also a DNS server. So that's automatically populated. So it's going to assign this as the DNS server address. And I'll just click next for that. WINS is a deprecated service that we do not use anymore. That's why it's optional here. You don't have to fill it in. Click next. Any network you go to today, that's just going to be like non-existent. So we'll just click next past that. That's a holdover from the days of Windows NT. Well, now I can say, yes, I want to activate this scope. And that's it. This thing actually works. All you need is a scope that's activated, and you need your server to be authorized. Now, to verify this is working, I want to open my scope here. And under address leases, right now, we can refresh, but I have no address leases right now. And I'm on RTS-DC1. A quick way to verify that this works. I'm going to go back to my other server, RTS Serve 1. I'm going to go to local server, and I'm going to click on Ethernet, which will show up here. There it is. So right now, this server has a static IP address. Now I'm going to click Properties. I'll go to my IP version 4. So right now, the IP address on this server ends in 251. I'm going to remember that because I'm going to set this back statically in a moment. But just to verify my DHCP server is working, I'm going to click Obtain an IP address automatically, Obtain DNS server automatically, and OK and close, and that's it. It should already have an address. So I'm going to go to PowerShell, and in PowerShell, I'm just going to type ipconfig. Well, that worked. This now has an IP address 192.168.1.100. Now I'm going to type ipconfig /all, and you can see here the DHCP server that leased the address is 192.168.1.250. So we know for a fact that worked. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to set this address back statically. And I know the address before we made that change was 192.168.1.251. Default subnet mask and the preferred DNS was 192.168.1.250. So now back to using the static address. But we verified that DHCP actually worked. Now if I minimize this and go back to my RTS DC1, I'm going to refresh this view. Now when I refresh the view, you can see 192.168.1.100 is assigned to RTS Serve 1. Now you have to be very quick because what happens when you actually set your address back statically, it actually sends a release request of that address to the DHCP server, which makes sense because if you now have a static address, there's no point for DHCP to hold this address for you for the next 8 days. So if you were to assign this, verified, obtained, then you set your address back statically, it sometimes takes just a couple seconds and this will just disappear. So if you don't see this here, that would be why if you do this in your own environment. Pretty fascinating and pretty straightforward to actually set up.